Today we're on our 2008 enterprise server, and we're going to set up network address translation, or NAT, and a VPN server and client. Now, network address translation allows you to take a public IP address, one single public IP, and share that among many private IP addresses, and it also hides those private IP addresses from the public. So it can be both a security device and also a network sharing type of device. VPNs, of course, allow you to create an encrypted tunnel to a host, or for a host to create an encrypted tunnel through an internet or broadband connection to a company server. There's several ways to get to what we need. In this case, I have a shortcut to the server manager on my desktop, but if you don't have one, you can go to Control Panel and Administrative Tools, and then the server manager. And I just have shortcuts on my desktop because I use these items frequently, Administrative Tools and the server manager. But in the server manager, once it comes up, you can install roles or set up new roles, remove roles. You can set up features or remove features. You can modify group policy. It's collecting data. Let's wait a few minutes here. Okay. I'll open this. Notice here's the GPMC, Group Policy Management Console. If I look at roles, here are the current roles my server is playing. So I am a domain controller with the 5 operations master roles, DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol server, and I am a DNS server so far. What I want to do is add a role, and I want to configure routing and remote access to enable both a NAT server and a VPN server. So I'm going to say add roles. Go ahead and launch the wizard here. I'm going to click next. And what I want to do is add network policy and access services. So I'm going to go ahead and check that. I'm going to click next. And then I'm going to click next. And the particular service that I want to configure is going to be a routing and remote access server. So I'm going to go ahead and select that option. Click next, and I'll click install. Now, one of the things that we'll have to do is we'll have to modify whatever user accounts we want to dial in over the VPN. There's 2 ways to do that. You can either edit a network access policy and grant permission that way, and then you can select in their user accounts that they get that permission from the network access policy, or you can simply grant permission on their user account object in Active Directory users and computers. So we'll look at both ways of doing that. And while it's installing, I guess I can yak a little bit about some of the features of our VPN server. Our VPN server with 2008 will support 3 basic protocols. The first one you'll see is SSTP, Secure Socket Tunneling Protocol, and it uses the SSL port, Secure Sockets Layer, port 443, to connect a host machine to a server through an encrypted tunnel. This is very useful because 443 is usually open on most firewalls because that's secure web traffic, HTTPS, or if you use SSL, a secure socket layer connection. The other 2 protocols that it supports, PPTP for older systems that may not support SSTP or L2TP. PPTP is point-to-point tunneling protocol, and it uses MPPE for encryption. And then, of course, your VPN server in 2008 will also support L2TP, Layer 2 tunneling protocol, which uses IPsec as a means of encryption and for security policies. You can configure different IPsec policies. Now, also, one of the things you'll notice when we set up NAT is that it configures a firewall. You'll be able to select a public and private interface, and on the public interface, it'll go ahead and configure a firewall. Okay, so now we've set up our routing and remote access server. Notice now under roles we have network policy and access. And let's go ahead, and we have to enable routing and remote access here. Now that it's been installed and configured as a role, I'm going to right click and I'll say configure and enable routing and remote access. And this will give me the capability or access to setting up both a NAT server and a VPN server, or in our case both. Now notice the options here. I could choose to set up just a dial-in VPN server. I could choose to set up just a NAT server, network address translation. I want to do virtual VPN and NAT. We'll do both at the same time, try to kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. But also what this will do is anybody who dials into our server and creates a VPN connection, through that encrypted tunnel, they'll be able to access via our NAT server the private network, the local area network. They'll even be able to access the internet through their connection to our server. They already have access to the internet if they're making a connection over broadband, of course, so that's kind of a moot point, but just to show you what the combination of VPN and NAT would do. So let's go ahead and now we have two interfaces here for our VPN connection. Select the network interface that connects to the internet. In this case, where I have a number assigned via DHCP, this represents the address that I would get from my internet service provider. This is where I connect to the internet. So this is DHCP given to me by my ISP. This, on the other hand, is a static IP address. And that's where my DHCP server, my DNS server, all of those things are set up on that static IP, and in this case also my NAT and VPN server. So it's very important that you select the proper interface, and the reason is because the wizard's going to configure a firewall on that interface. So in this case I want to select my DHCP interface. This connects me to the internet. That's where we'll place the firewall. Now, the next question in the wizard, how do you want IP addresses to be assigned to remote clients? Automatically or from a specified range of addresses? If you choose automatically, what you can do is configure a scope on your DHCP server to service those requests. And that's okay, but I'm going to choose this particular option from a specified range of addresses, and the reason is because it will reduce some traffic between my VPN NAT server and my DHCP server. And what this does is it'll just pull from an internal database that you configure. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a scope here. And I'll set up 192.168.8200. I want to make sure that it doesn't overlap or conflict with the range of IP addresses that my DHCP server is handing out, which stops at 100. And then 192.168. You can choose how many connections you want to allow. The maximum number of connections I'll allow is going to be, let's say 21. Of course, the last valid IP would be 254. The first fellow would be 1, but on my DHCP server, my scope is from 1 to 100. So I just want to make sure that these don't, I don't want to create an IP conflict. So okay, because I will be translating this traffic onto the network. And all right, we're going to go next. Now this is asking me, do I want to set the server to work with a radius server? Now I could configure a radius server. And what a radius server does is it allows you to tie together multiple VPN servers, or routing and remote access servers, and configure them all with a single, remote access policy, or a central remote access policy. Sort of like group policy. We've been talking about group policy and we've experimented with it, seen how it works. So you can set up group policy in a domain controller and it replicates out and controls security throughout the whole network. Well, that's what Radius does. I can set up a remote access policy on a Radius server, and then I would configure all my routing and remote access servers to use that Radius server as a central remote access policy that would govern all of them. But in this case, we'll create a standalone NAT or VPN server. I'm going to go ahead and say finish.